Hey, it's the Orange and Blue News podcast back again, and coming from the On Three Network. We got Scott Burgess with us from Prep Hoops, always one of our favorite guests. Scott, we made the jump, man. We're on the On Three Network, and still the Rivals brand recruiting wise, but exciting times for us, and always good to have you on to talk Illinois high school basketball recruiting. And I know the June Scholastic events are in the rearview mirror, the live periods in June, and what'd you guys learn? You were out on the road covering a lot of events. What events did you stop by, and what are some observations you had this June?
Yeah, we were at the two major ones. I was It was a busy month for me. June's always crazy. I help run Nike Elite 100 camp from an administrative standpoint. So I was at it from June 10th to the 19th. And then I drove directly from that to Chicago for the Riverside Brookfield high school live shootout, which is one of the best events of the year. I think in my preview story of it, we had the top 17 players in the senior class were all there. I think 72 out of the top 100 seniors, and that was similar story in the younger classes as well. Getting to see pretty much everyone in one spot is always cool. And then Division I coaches being out, players are gonna definitely bring their A games and play as hard as they can. So that was the first weekend of the live period. I went to UIC's team camp in the middle of the week, which is always a fun kind of like extra event that I try to do when I'm in Chicago um, to cover those games or cover some teams that I might not have seen during the first live period and be able to knock them out ahead of the second live period. And then there's some teams like Shepard, who has the best big man in the 28 class that didn't play in either live period. So getting to see those players was always fun. And then finished out the month with the Romeoville live event and just a massive event, 10 courts going on pretty much from noon on Friday all the way through Sunday at what I think the last game was ended at 3. And on Saturday there was even they were using the high school as well, so there was 16 courts going at a time. So more basketball than you could ever want to see.
Is that a Romeoville live event, a relatively new event?
So they've had the live event, I think, 3 times now. So how the IBCA sets it up is the Illinois Basketball Coaches Association is each weekend there are two events. So the first weekend there was Riverside Brookfield, and then DeKalb had an event as well. And then the second weekend it was Romeoville and an event in Rockford. So traditionally, the three main sites for events have been for the biggest events, let's say, are Riverside Brookfield's had it, I'm pretty sure, every year. And then Ridgewood and Romeoville have either rotated or there was one year where they both got it, which was a little hectic when it's because honestly, essentially, some of these teams, what they'll do is you're allowed to play 4 games in an event. They'll play 2 games on Friday and one, 2 games Saturday morning and another. And then there was teams that were going to like Rockford and DeKalb to play 4 more games to get seen in front of, more coaches or just get more game time in there. So, yeah, that's kind of how it's set up.
Well, high school recruiting is not quite what it was when we first got into this game, maybe 15 or more years ago. But there's still some good players in the state coming up, especially the young guys. And I know there's three that Illinois, or actually four that Illinois really is very interested in, high on their list. In the 26 class, Lincoln Williams from Kankakee, they've been on him for a while now. Came by Illinois for several games last year, and then Jackson Davis really. We started watching him as a freshman at Warren. We knew he was going to be good, Didn't know he's going to be this good. He looks like the best player in the state to me, regardless of class. Really a dynamic left-handed combo guard, a scoring point guard. Brady Pedigrew, a wing from Bolingbrook, and Bolingbrook just keeps churning them out. A kid leaves, and then they churn out another talented kid in Petigrew. And then Cole Kelly, love that big left-handed shooter out of Nequa Valley. Usually a football school, but they got a really good basketball player in Cole Kelly. So let's start this with Jackson Davis. And everything I read, and everything I saw on the X platform, everyone's real excited about his development and kind of his emergence as the top player in the state.
Yeah, I got to see him three different events. So he was at Elite 100 against the best players in the country in the 27 and 28 class. And I think in that setting, he got to show being a true facilitator and a true point guard, which I think at the next level is going to be his biggest strength. He would, I think it was the Monday night game. I look back, he only scored 9 points, but he completely dominated the game in every way, especially with his passing, pick and pop passes, hitting guys on slips, just finding shooters. Every way he could get guys involved, he did. Um, and then when you get to more of a high school setting, for his team at Warren, he has to score for them to win. They're a really good high school team, and they were runners up last year, and they're going to be one of the top teams preseason again this year. But for them to win, he has to score. And his ability to make shots at a high level is really impressive. Shot it very well from three throughout both events that I saw at Ridgewood or Romeoville and Riverside Brookfield. He had a 38-point game. I think at Riverside Brookfield, he went for 30 plus 3 of the 4 games. Was very good when I saw him at Romeoville as well. Just he's the ultimate winner at the high school level. He's that guy that if you had a pick of anybody in the state, that's going to be the number one pick for anyone to win a high school basketball game in the state of Illinois. And he proved it throughout the month. They won at a high level, and I think he played very, very well.
He's always had that quick twitch athleticism that really jumped out at you, and the stop and go quickness and all that kind of stuff. But his skill set caught up with that, I think that's why he's really emerging as such a highly coveted kid. Do you get a feel from him yet, recruiting wise, how that's going to play out?
It's still pretty early in the process. His dad has been around the game for a long time as well, coaching AAU and been involved in this. So I think they're going to take their time. I wouldn't expect any kind of early commitment or anything like that. I think he's just kind of taking his time and seeing what comes about. There was a lot of high major coaches at his games throughout the 2 weekends, mostly. But honestly, just in general for the state of Illinois, it was mostly it's from a high major perspective, mostly assistant coaches at the events, but they were definitely um, at his games throughout the 2 live periods.
Yeah, Illinois was on him really early, and then with all of their focus on the transfer portal and the overseas recruiting from Europe, it seems like not weren't paying quite as much attention. But it looks like they're showing up at his games and watching him play and kind of getting back into that recruitment.
Yeah, yeah, they had Coach Hammer and Tyler Underwood were both seen at his games throughout the 2 weekends in Chicago, and um, obviously he's the best player in the state. They're going to make him a priority, and yeah, I mean he's a 2027 prospect. It's not like when you and I first started doing this when you know incoming freshmen were getting offers and getting a ton of attention. Like honestly, like college coaches for the most part really don't even care about 27 and 28 at this point. Like they'll throw offers out there, but it's not like they're making them a priority. Like they're gonna go see them and everything, but it's not like they're pushing for commitments or pushing to get them on a ton of visits or anything like that. It's the transfer portal has just completely changed everything where everything's very short term and like even the 26 class, those guys are just really now getting their recruitments going in a lot of cases. And in the case in past years, that a lot of them would even be done by now.
Yeah, and one of those 26 kids that Illinois had their eye on is, Lincoln Williams from Kankakee, not too far from Champaign, just up the road on I-57, and had him on campus multiple times. A slasher, a real athletic kid. What would you see from him in June and kind of his development skill wise? We always known he's a plus athlete, above the rim type of player. What have you seen from his skills, shooting and passing?
Yeah, I thought he played well the first weekend. I thought, he had in one of the games I saw, I can't remember who they played. It was a pretty big game, and he started off a little bit slow and then got it really going in the second half. I would say the most dominant individual performance on both ends of the floor that I saw this past weekend at Romeoville was from him against Oswego. He he just completely took over the game. There was a ton of coaches watching, and he wanted to make a statement that I'm the best player and it's not close in that 26th class. And I think he did that. One thing that really impressed me was what he did defensively. He's always had the frame and the length to be a good defender, but that was the first time I saw him ever say, I'm going to impact slash dominate the game on that end of the floor. I think he blocked three pointers in that game alone, and starting getting out in transition, scoring that way. The skill level has definitely come along. He's a above average shooter. I wouldn't say he's like a plus shooter from three, but he can make shots from the perimeter. The handles have improved certainly. Just his overall ability to impact the game on both ends, I think, is one thing that really impressed me. And when his motor is running that high, he's without a doubt the most impactful senior in the state.
The times we've seen him at State Farm Center, we've talked to him, and you always got the feeling that he does like Illinois, but you never really got the feeling that he's a lock for Illinois in any way. There's a lot of other schools involved. What's your feeling on the recruiting side for Lincoln?
Yeah, I mean, so he set up two officials to SLU and Arizona State. Arizona State obviously has the Mac Urban Fire connection. And I think they did have they offered recently, if I remember correctly. To me, the two schools that have pursued him the hardest have been Illinois and SLU, with maybe DePaul also in there as well. He's been on SLU's campus multiple times. They've made him a priority, and I think Illinois, from any prospect in state, that's the guy that they kind of zeroed in on pretty early, getting him on quite a few visits. He's been down for games on a pretty regular basis. He would usually text me when he was going down there, and um, I was watching a game one time, and we know where the recruit's set behind, kind of behind the basket, and I see him. I was like, oh, another visit. So yeah, he's definitely been there quite a few times. I would expect them to get an official visit, and if they really push for his services, I definitely see them being a major factor in it.
One factor there is, in past years, we're always wondering, will Illinois take this kid or will they take that kid? And you only had 13 spots, but now with 15 scholarships, and we talked to Josh Whitman, the athletic director, last week, and he says they're going to be funding more scholarships, so you're not talking walk-ons or partial scholarships. You're talking about 15 full rides to play basketball at Illinois. Do you think that affects kids that might be a little bit on the margin as far as taking them?
I think honestly, it more has to do with NIL at this point. I think it's the new walk-ons are those guys at the end of the scholarship roster that you don't have to pay. So they're on scholarship, they're getting paid by the school to go to school and all that stuff. But they're not going to make the NIL money. So it's kind of like you're saving cap money um, by getting those type of players. I mean, Lincoln Williams is a player that's going to get NIL money. He's the best player in the state. He's not that, but when you talk about how the scholarships are being used at this point, yeah, it's definitely changed. It's the increase in scholarships, but at the end of the day, like I think most teams um, are looking at it from a core maybe 10 guys that we want to invest most of our money in, and then have one or two guys that are kind of like a project type, like a Jactus or a player like that, where down the line we can see them being something. And then those last two or three spots, they're gonna use on guys that are good team guys, going to be good practice players,
Practice players,
Like
right?
a Braden Fagbemi, that is going to come in and um, you're not expecting him to play. I mean, he's essentially what the old version of the walk on would have been in this day and age.
Well, some two really good young players in the state, going to be sophomores this year. Brady Pedigrew. I hope the kid stays in the state of Illinois. He's a great player. You watch his clips, and he's size, shooting, gets to the rim. What's his ceiling, Scott? Brady Pedigrew, and do you feel like he's going to be a national recruit? Seems like he's going to be pretty high on everybody's list, and probably a national recruit.
Yeah, he was one of, maybe 20, 25 at most sophomores that got invited to Nike Elite 100 camp. So obviously, when you're in that group of players, you're considered one of the best players in your class early on. And he at that camp he played very well. Especially the last day, he went off for I think he had a 25-point game, a 19-point game, and then I saw him in one of the tournament games play really well, actually against his former teammate Davion Thompson. And then you know, at the live events, he was really good as well. You can see him taking on that role of being the guy for his team now, which is crazy to think as a sophomore. It's like you have to take on that role already, but he knows it's his team, and he knows that he can impact the game on both ends of the floor. Good athlete that can knock down shots. He's creative with the ball. He's a bucket getter from all three levels, and he can play some on the ball. I don't think he'll ever be a true point guard. I think that's his goal down the line, is to be considered a point guard. I think right now he's more of a two that can play on the ball and be a connective passer, but definitely one of the top players in the state. I know Florida offered after the one of the live events, so his recruitment is trending toward the same as those those 327 guys were as far as a national recruitment. And I think the difference is with him is I think he's got more size than a lot of those other prospects that were kind of combo-ish type guards.
Big body too, mature body for a kid
Hmm.
just in the 28 class. So
Yeah, and obviously he has great bloodlines. His brothers both went on to be Trey Pettigrew, and then his JT Pettigrew, who was on the team last year, is it going to Valpo. So his dad's, a very well-known, established high school football coach. So sports is definitely in their blood.
now, everybody's looking for shooting. Everybody spreads the court, plays 4 out, 5 out offense. And, Cole Kelly just from Nickel Valley just looks like a kid who just fits that style of play perfectly with his ability to fill it up. I love the Chris Mullen like left-handed
Yeah.
jumper for the old guys out there who who know who Chris Mullen is, but it reminds me of that type of player. Just can fill it up, but he can put it on the floor and get to the bucket too. So I think you have him number one in the 2028 class. So impressive for this kid. Tell me what you saw in June.
Yeah, was one of the more hyped players coming in, and he has lived up to it. He played 16U right out of the jump on the last year on the Under Armour circuit for breakaway. They flipped to Adidas this year, and he's playing 17U as a 2028, and he's posting numbers. He's their best player. So with him, pro productivity is already there. Very skilled player, lefty, can really shoot the basketball from the perimeter, connective passer. He makes really good reads, finding cutters, just an overall advanced feel at a young age. Maybe not like the most electric athlete, but with his shooting and his IQ and his passing and just overall offensive feel for the game, Um, he's definitely a high major prospect, rebounds the ball really well for his team. His squad, they played some tough competition and they struggled to get some wins because it's basically him and one other guy on their team that'll probably play at the college level. So, but he's definitely one of the best players in that class and really in the state. I think we've talked about four players so far that would probably be among the top 4 to 6 players, regardless of class in the state.
Yeah, and I think those are four that Illinois has been on and will continue to recruit. But one of the great things that I like about covering AAU events and even these scholastic events where you see so much basketball and so many different teams, occasionally you see a kid have a breakout event. Um, it happened with quite a few players over the years, and it's my probably my favorite part about covering AAU basketball is those breakout players. But did anybody jump out at you here in the month of June, or maybe back in the spring, who you think's gonna be a big name eventually that a program like Illinois might take a look at?
Um, I don't know about Illinois. I think some of the guys that really created a lot of buzz were more like mid-major type guys, like Stephen Brown from Marist. He's also a football recruit. He's actually one of the better uncommitted football prospects. He had a really strong spring, or he had a really strong June for Marist. Rashawn Porter is a player from DePaul Prep that's gotten a little bit of buzz at the high major level. He's a strong-bodied four-man. Some think he's more of an undersized five, but the athleticism's really improved there for him. His quickness, his pop around the basket on both ends. Noah Mister played really well from Mount Carmel. He's a player that's going to see a pretty big bump in his stock. Chris Bolte from St. Ignatius, face up four that can really shoot the basketball. Thought he had a, I thought he had a really good month. I would say from a Illinois perspective, maybe you're looking at some of those younger classes, like 2028, for example. Amarion Smith Hawley is a player that we had ranked third coming into the summer in that class. And he more than lived up to it. One of the more explosive scoring guards in that class. He's got the ball on a string. He can get anywhere he wants. Went up head to head against Jackson Davis and more than held his own. With a lot of coaches in hand for that game, I remember texting almost every one of them, and I said, "I know you're here for Jackson, but watch." I think he was number 2 for Peoria Richwoods. I said he's one of the best in the state, and there was rave reviews about him. Hayden Schroeder from Wheaton Academy is probably the best pure big man in the 27 class. He had a very consistent back-to-back showings at both events. Mobile four, they can finish around the basket, face up a little bit. I thought he was very productive and continued to show growth in his game. So those are just a few of the ones that took steps up in their game and helped their stock. I don't think there was really many guys that went from like somebody I didn't either know um, or thought was more like a mid guy that went up to high major. And then there was several transfers that came into the state. Jamison Williams from East St. Louis, and his brother Jamison White, sorry, Jamison White and Jahidi White Jr., the sons of former NBA player Jahidi White. They transferred in from Chaminade in St. Louis to East St. Louis. Um, they both look the part physically. Jamison played very well throughout both weekends, and they'll both probably end up in the top 10. In the next update, EJ Hazlitt moved over from Indiana to Illinois from remember the name of the school. He's from Indianapolis. He's going to Kankakee. His dad's going to be the high school football coach there. So he's a top 5, 6 player in the class. Skilled, tough, face up four that can rebound, play around the basket. So those are a couple of the newer names to that emerged. I know Jamison and Jahidi have had attention from high majors. I don't think anything has been like solidified yet in that way. And same thing with EJ Hazlitt. Hazlitt was ranked third in our Indiana rankings before he moved over. He's five in our rankings currently. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility he ends up being a high major player, but I think right now more mid major plus is probably where he's at.
Scott, I'm probably giving away my age, but I always think back to Anthony Davis showing up at a spring event with Mean Streets back in the day and just blowing everybody out of the water. I don't think you'll see a kid like that kind of breakout ever again. It just it seemed to come out of nowhere. Maybe for guys like you who are watching a lot of high school ball, it wasn't out of nowhere, but for the rest of us, it was like, whoa, who's that guy? And then just a rocket ride to the number one player in his class nationally. Will we ever see anything like that again?
Probably not, just because I think at this point there's so many, these kids are playing in so many events, there's so many eyes on them. And even at a young age, when you're in seventh, eighth grade, like you already have like established names and you know who they are coming into high school. And then late in the process, there's always going to be guys that are going to be late bloomers, especially big men. Big men and traditionally have been late bloomers. They come along from a skills perspective later, but nothing like Anthony Davis, where he goes from a 6'2" guard as a sophomore to a 6'9", 6'10" big man as a senior, and not only growing, but his skill set, his athleticism. It was crazy. And he played on maybe the worst high school team I've ever seen an elite player play on, where I think I saw him go for like quadruple doubles almost, and his team would lose by 20. They couldn't even get the ball across half court. But I give him a lot of credit, though. He stayed with the guys that were his guys for his senior year. He had everything he needed at that point. And but yeah, I think that was a once in a lifetime type story with Anthony Davis.
Really was. So, well, what do you got going on in the month of July? Scott, you got some events you're going to be out watching?
Yeah, so Prep Hoops, we have a couple of events this month. The tune up this weekend in Chicago, and then the following weekend, I'm going to be covering the fourth session of Nike UIBL in North Augusta, and then the following weekend, I'll be in Indianapolis for our live period event in Indianapolis at Prep Hoops. We'll be in the northern suburbs at a few of those big gyms that they have over in Indiana.
Well, for the Illini fans out there that may not know what you guys do at Prep Hoops, they should by now after all this time. But um, tell them a little bit about Prep Hoops, what you guys do, and how they can subscribe.
Yeah, so it's prephoops.com/Illinois. The Prep Hoops Network, we have individualized states for or individualized sites for every state uh, in the United States. And so what we do is we cover our states like a Rivals or an On3 would cover the entire country, where I'm writing 2 to 3 stories a day. I'm really proud of our team. We have 5 writers that have taken this site to another level, especially over the last month. Some of these events we've been covering, we've been putting up 40, 50 stories on those events within the span of, going into the weekend and then covering it during the weekend and then the week after. So tons of high school basketball coverage. It's not always the elite players we're writing about. We like to write about under the radar players, new names that emerge, incoming freshmen to get, fans familiar with who the next stars are going to be. So we cover high school basketball year round. So it's, during high school basketball season from November to March, it's all about the games, the players, the prospects, and then move into the spring, AAU, pretty much every single weekend. June, the scholastic events, things like Nike Elite 100. Um, and then when we get into July, more AAU. and then it goes right into fall camp season. So we'll have a freshman camp, which last year, we had Cole Kelly, we had Brady Pedigrew, we had Ethan Ball, we had Amarion Smith Hawley, the top four, or actually Braden Porter, top five players in the state were all at our freshman camp. So we'll have one weekend in Chicago in August. I think it's the 23rd and 24th, where we'll have our freshman camp, our sophomore camp, and our upperclassmen camp. And so we get to see a ton of players. And then there will be more camp coverage throughout the fall. We'll have preseason coverage, looking at teams to watch and all that stuff. And I think what we do at Prep Hoops that separates us is we cover everybody. We don't just focus on those elite players. We're interested in covering players that might be Division III prospects or NAIA guys, or and getting out to cover guys at high schools. Like I covered a game of Brown County. I'd never even heard of Brown County High School this past weekend, but they had a couple 2028s that I had heard some buzz about. So we checked them out. So yeah, and one subscription with us, you get the entire country. So you don't just get the state of Illinois, you get all of our states who do the exact same thing that we do at the Illinois site, but in their individual states.
And now, is there a parent company that owns Prep Hoops? I see some football coverage every now and then. Prep Zone, is that associated with the Prep Hoops?
Yeah, yeah. So actually, the parent company is called Prep Network, and we have boys basketball, girls basketball, middle school basketball, volleyball, soccer, lacrosse, um, football as well. I actually for the last 18 months, I've been the lead writer for Prep Red Zone Illinois as well. So ranking and covering those guys, like in our senior class rankings, that we unveiled at the end of May, ranked 375 players in the 26 class in Illinois, broke down all their films, all their evaluations, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a very it's completely changed since when I joined. When I joined the company in 2014, it was just a boys basketball site, and we only had like 6 or 8 states, and then that expanded, and we expanded to another thing, and then we also do events. We run every single weekend between all our stuff. We're probably running upwards of 10 to 12 events throughout the country.
But you're doing some great work, Scott. I always appreciate you coming on and informing Illini fans on Orange and Blue News. We'll have you on anytime you want to come on. You let me know, and we'll do another one. But thanks as always. We'll see you out on the trail, I think, in July at a few events. But thanks again, Scott. I always appreciate it.
Thanks, Doug.